Hey there, Flourish Writers friends. I am Jenny Kokert, and today I want to share a little known trick that we use often here at Flourish Writers, and that is this practice of reading like a writer. And there's something you may not know about me. Some of you do, some of you don't. But in kind of past life, I was a private investigator for many years. And a tool that I used often as a private investigator was my observation skills. And there is a lot to be said about learning from textbooks and courses and classes, but I feel like observation skills, learning through the art of observation, is missed often. And as writers and communicators and content creators, there is so much we can learn from the works of others simply through observation. And one of the best ways to grow in the craft of writing is to read good writing, right? But not just read it for the sake of reading it, but what can we glean from it? How can we study it from a writerly perspective? And that's what we like to call reading like a writer. So I want to share with you 5 things to look for when you're reading like a writer. And these are really simple. You can make a note kind of at the front of a book. Just pick up a book that interests you, or maybe a genre that you're currently writing in, or that you want to learn more about how to write and grow in that craft. And just write these 5 things down kind of at the beginning of the book. You're going to need maybe some colored pencils, some highlighters, whatever it is that helps you learn, helps you connect that visual tool. And so you want to grab that and you want to write these 5 things down. I'm going to go through them one by one and even give you a few examples. The first one is really easy to pick up on and observe when you're reading, but it's also really crucial as writers that we get this right. And that is and you may have heard this term before, but the hook is basically what keeps a reader reading, right? They have to get past that first paragraph, and then they've got to get past the first chapter, and then they've got to get past all the chapters, because the goal as a writer is that they finish your book or your article or your podcast or whatever it is that you are creating, right? You desire that they get through the entire thing. And we do this by implementing those hooks, right? Just like we put a little bit of bait on a fish hook to grab that fish, we want to do the same thing in our writing. But again, this is really easy to notice when you're reading like a writer. So what you want to look at is that first paragraph, especially in the first chapter. How did they start it? What's the first line, right? That's a pretty crucial sentence. How do they end a chapter? How do they start the next one? How do they end the next one, right? Where are the hooks that they are placing in so that when you finish chapter 1, you want to go on to chapter 2, and so on and so forth, right? So I'm reading this great Christian fiction book here, and I want to share with you the very first sentence of chapter 1. And it says, Clara Kipp had prayed repeatedly to die in San Pablo. Like, so that piques my interest right away. That's a hook. A hook is something that's like, whoa, that's interesting. I want to go ahead and read more. So it's really easy. Make those observations, especially in those first paragraph and last paragraph of the chapters. Grab a highlighter or a pen and just highlight or mark through what you feel is a hook. All right. The second thing to look for is what we like to call word pictures. And this is just really good descriptive language. As writers, we want to do more showing than telling. Showing is what makes a scene come to life. It's really what connects with the reader. And so we want to make sure that we are showing as vividly and descriptively as possible the stories that we're telling, the concepts, right? And so this is another really easy thing to mark in the book. And that's just great descriptive language. Often you'll know that it's great descriptive language because you can so vividly see that scene or that person or whatever it is that they're describing in your mind's eye. And so when you notice that, again, we have to be observers. We have to read not to be entertained, but read as, we're studying the text. And so when you notice, wow, I really can see that. Like, I feel like I'm there. When you tell yourself that, you want to make note of that. Something that I really like to use in my own writing are alliterations. I just am a sucker for a great alliteration. So when I notice alliterations in others, I love jotting those down. And here's one that I loved. It said, soul tickling sounds of samba. Soul tickling sounds of samba. Love that. Like, she could have said the sounds of samba, right? She could have said the samba music. But when we connect it, we make this fun alliteration, and we also describe the sound, soul tickling, comes alive. And again, that's even another way, right, of hooking, of connecting with our reader, which actually leads me to the third thing that we want to look for. And these next three that I'm going to share kind of all go hand in hand. They're all interconnected, but it's something I like to call emotional beats. And story, right, connects with our soul. At the end of the day, whatever you're writing, we want to make a soul connection with our reader. And it is through what I believe are emotional beats, right? The heartbeats of your story that move a story along that help connect it. And so emotional beats are very strategically written sentences. Sometimes they're a little longer, they're scenes that create an emotional connection in you as a reader. And so here's one. This is still from chapter 1 in this book. Such an odd feeling to know that once she walked in, she would not walk out. And so this story is about a woman that's in her last kind of dying days. And so that sentence alone is that little emotional beat. You don't have to, it's not this big emotional scene or this big dramatic scene. Those are coming. But I feel like the way that we create momentum or rising action in a story is through these strategically pointed sentences that connect emotionally to you as a reader. All right, so that's emotional beats. The fourth thing to look for, and this one we've got to step back a little bit more. Often you're going to look at this as a whole when you're done reading a book, and that's the timeline or the structure that the author created. And this is actually something that's one of the hardest things as authors to figure out is the timeline of a story, the structure of a story. Where does it start? Where does it go next? How does it end? And then how do you kind of take the reader on that emotional journey and tell your story but also keeping this whole timeline in place, right? So that's not easy. But again, through observational skills, and actually with regards to structure, with regards to timeline, this is one of the main ways that we teach structure when writing any book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, is to observe the structure in other books. How did they set up the chapters, right? Where do they go? Where did they start the story? How are they using, this book is very strategically using flashbacks, right? At certain points. So the best thing to do when you're kind of just in the middle of studying a book is to make little notes per chapter of the timeline. So, like, what's happening, which leads me to the fifth thing to look for. And again, these are all interconnected with timeline as well. And that's the purpose or the premise. And a great question to ask yourself when studying a book is the end of this chapter, what was the purpose of it? So if you can discern or define the purpose of the chapter, right? That's going to kind of give you a clue. And then at the end of a book, you can kind of put all that together and really see the timeline that the author was going for. And this works particularly well with fiction because there's a big, sometimes more complicated storyline and timeline that's needing to be followed. And when you can ask yourself, okay, well, what did this chapter accomplish in your own writing when you're writing something, right? What do I need this chapter to accomplish? But also when you're studying somebody else's writing, what did this chapter accomplish? Was it character development? Was it conflict? Was it conflict resolution? Was it rising action? Was it, whatever it might be? And so again, ask yourself, what does this chapter accomplish? And you're going to start putting that together, putting those puzzle pieces together, and really understanding the timeline and the purpose and premise of the book. So just to reiterate, 5 things to look for when you're reading like a writer are the hook, great word pictures. These are descriptive scenes that really come alive in your mind's eye. Emotional beats, so strategically placed sentences that create an emotional connection. The timeline and the structure of the story, and then the purpose or premise of those chapters and how they move that timeline across. So I hope this encourages you that you can pick up any book and use a really fun way, use your observation skills to just grow in that craft of writing in your own life. And then go over your notes and just start applying those same the things that you observe, those same tools and techniques and strategies in your own writing life. So I hope that I will encourage you that the next time you pick up a book, you can read it like a writer and utilize and look for these 5 things.